This video will cover the fundamentals of proper squat technique. Most of the demonstrations are with a kettlebell to make it easy to see what's going on, but the same principles will apply regardless of if the implement is a barbell, a kettlebell, a sandbag, or anything else. The instruction will be broken down into three main parts. First, the stance and setup. Second, the execution of the lift. Third, common errors. Finally, everything will get recapped at the very end. The first thing to do is establish stance width. Most people do well with heels about shoulder width, give or take a little bit. Most people will do the best with a toe turnout of 15 to 30 degrees, although there is room for individual preference here. Finally, the spine should start neutral and be kept there at all times. Hyperextension and flexion of the spine should both be avoided. Next, we'll look at proper execution of the squat. An important difference between the squat and the deadlift is that in the squat, the hips and knees flex or bend roughly the same amount. Just like in the deadlift, the spine should remain neutral at all times. The spine should not deviate from its original position over the course of the set. Looking at the feet, the entire foot should be firmly planted on the ground. The heels being driven into the floor are particularly critical for good technique. Regarding range of motion, proper technique dictates that the crease of the hip descends lower than the top of the knee without sacrificing any other aspect of proper form. During the ascent, the shoulders and hips must rise together. It's not good to let the hips rise faster than the shoulders. Lastly, the knees must track the toes at all times. Next, we'll take a quick look at how to safely get a kettlebell into position for a squat. The first option is to stand with the kettlebell between the feet, hinge down with a neutral spine, and pop it up using the hips, catching it in front of the chest. When setting the kettlebell down, the spine must also remain neutral. If the kettlebell being used is heavy, doing a hike pass first will help generate more power to get the kettlebell up to chest height to catch it. Otherwise, the technique involving the hike pass is identical to the previous one. What should be avoided is ever lifting the kettlebell off of the ground with a flexed spine, as shown here. Just like we would never do it for a deadlift, we don't want to do it for a squat. Next, we'll look at common errors with the squat. One of the most common issues is what's called valgus collapse of the knees. Basically, this means the knees have caved inwards into a knock-kneed type of position. This position is stressful on the knees and the hips and should be avoided. Another mistake is to allow the heels to lift up at the bottom of the squat. Improving mobility and stability at the ankles, hips, and core will help fix this, as will wearing lifting shoes. The next error that we'll look at is allowing the spine to go into flexion during the squat. Typically, this happens at the bottom position of the squat and is often referred to as butt wink when the lower back moves into flexion and the tailbone curls underneath of the lifter. The final mistake we'll look at is allowing the hips to rise faster than the shoulders. Not only is this a poor way to develop leg strength, it can also risk injury to the neck and lower back. Next, let's recap proper goblet squat technique. The spine should stay neutral at all times. The heel should stay firmly planted. The knees should track the toes. The crease of the hip descends lower than the top of the knee, and the hips and shoulders rise together. Next, we'll take a quick look at squatting with a barbell rather than a kettlebell. The first thing to note is the barbell requires much more mobility than the kettlebell. It is common for people to stick with kettlebell squats for a while as they work on mobility and strength before advancing to a barbell. Specifically, the barbell makes it harder to achieve proper depth with an upright torso, so the demands on mobility in the hips and ankles, as well as stability from the core, are much higher. Most people who do a lot of barbell squats invest in weightlifting shoes. These shoes have a non-compressive sole as well as a heel lift. This results in squatting deeper with a more upright torso compared to bare feet. Most lifters at Industrial Strength wear these for squats, so consider investing in a pair if you plan on training with us. Here's a side-by-side look at the bottom position of the squat with bare feet compared to lifting shoes. Note how closed the knee joint is on the right-hand picture with the lifting shoes. If you look closely, you'll also see that in the right-hand picture with the lifting shoes, the crease of the hip is lower than with bare feet, yet the barbell is actually higher. Thank you for watching. To find out more about us, visit industrialstrengthgym.com, go to Facebook at Industrial Strength Gym, or on Instagram at Industrial Strength Gym.